Have you ever lived a Murphy's Law life? Like, no matter what you do, things go from good to bad to worse. And when you finally hit rock bottom, you realize you have whiplash. Maybe not your whole life is like that, but maybe there's that area of your life where you just feel like it's never going to turn up. And how about this? Have you ever felt like we lived in a Murphy's Law world? Have you ever looked at all the suffering and evil in the world and just wondered, where is God? And in the back of your head, maybe you wondered if he was really big enough to turn it all around. Well, I'm here to tell you, God can turn your seemingly impossible circumstances around to accomplish his good purpose. So my last job was actually at my church. I worked on the janitor team for 5 years, and after a while, I struggled with feeling stuck. I felt like God had called me to ministry, and specifically to an admin role or helper kind of position. But despite getting many interviews, I always got passed over without any real guidance or true explanation. Over and over again, I was heartbroken and frustrated, but I did not give up trusting in God's plan and his timing. During this time, I also decided to go back to school through SCU's Extension Site program. Also in this season, my whole team found out we were being let go due to budgetary reasons. Oh, and did I forget to mention, I was very pregnant. All of this accumulated to my last week of work and my first week of classes, as well as my due date falling all in the same week. It was a highly emotional, heartbreaking, and confusing time. But I continued to trust God, and after praying with my husband, we decided it'd be best for me to stay home full-time with the boys and do full-time school. God provided time and time again so that despite our one income, we were able to continue to pay our bills and keep food on the table. Fast forward to a little more than a year, and we're now 7 months into a nationwide pandemic with most of our communities still shut down. I was growing very tired of being home all the time with 2 small children and nowhere to go. Also in this season, Chick-fil-A announced they'd be opening up a new restaurant in my city and began hiring. What began as a crazy what if turned into an actual heart's desire and now a pretty amazing job. And even though I thought it would only be a part-time job to get me through school, it has turned into a place where I feel called to grow my leadership, to help mentor young people, and long-term make a difference in my community through. This story is still being written, but it's been so cool to see how God's took my Murphy's Law situation and replaced my heartbreak, frustration, and the seemingly impossible with something so good and something that can be used for his ultimate good. Maybe you've experienced something like this too. Maybe like me, it was a job or a dream that fell flat. Or maybe you're praying for your person, and despite feeling like God has given you a promise, you feel like it's taking forever. Maybe it's the loss of a loved one that felt too soon, or the betrayal of a good friend where it felt like just wasn't supposed to go this way. And maybe also you're experiencing this in a more universal sense. Maybe you're looking at our world going, what happened? And hopelessly wondering if we'll ever get back to a place of peace. The world has become such a dark, confusing place. It's easy to wonder, where is God in the midst of all this suffering? And where is God when I feel so heartbroken and alone? And why does it seem like sometimes God just up and changed his mind and totally abandoned us? Well, today we're going to look at the story of a man named Joseph. And there are a lot of details to his story, so I'm going to do my best just to give the highlights. As a young man, he'd received special treatment from his dad and prophetic dreams from God, which led to his jealous brothers selling him into slavery. In slavery, he found favor and worked his way up to head servant. His master's wife took notice and tried to seduce him, and then, when rejected, accused him of trying to take advantage of her, which landed him in prison. In prison, again, he finds favor and is made second in command. He correctly interprets 2 dreams of prison mates, but then is forgotten by the one who returns to Pharaoh's service. until Pharaoh has a troubling dream and no one can interpret it. Joseph interprets the dream and describes to Pharaoh that God is planning years of plenty followed by years of famine in the near future. So Pharaoh places him second in command to oversee a plan to save Egypt and the surrounding regions. This leads to Joseph saving many lives, being reunited with his family, and living the rest of their lives in Egypt. And after many years, Joseph's brothers worry he will seek revenge and try to trick him into forgiving them. Revenge was so far from Joseph's mind that he wept at their request. And this finally brings us to our main scripture. In Genesis 50, 20 and 21, his reply is, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then, don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." Joseph saw how God used everything in his life to accomplish God's ultimate plan, which was the saving of many lives. Joseph went through a lot before he saw the fulfillment of his dreams. And quite possibly the biggest hurt was the betrayal of his brothers. Despite Joseph's brothers acting in evil and sinful ways, their acts fell under God's decree. Or really, he permitted them, because through his infinite wisdom, he knew it would be worked out for good. I'm sure there were times when he struggled, but Joseph stayed faithful, and in the end, he was able to see how God worked together all he had gone through for the good of all mankind. This reminds me of another story in the Gospels. After Jesus' death and resurrection, he was now appearing to his disciples for the first time. They were likely all somewhere in the process of going from scared, alone, and hopeless to surprised, excited, and maybe still a little confused. In Luke 24, he reminds them, "This is what I told you about while I was still with you. Everything must be fulfilled that is written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets, and the Psalms." And he opens their mind so they could understand the scriptures. The disciples were waving the white flag. And in one moment, Jesus appears to them and reveals how God orchestrated this to take place from the beginning of time. Even though a lot of evil and human sin went into putting Jesus on the cross, he didn't fight back. And God allowed it to happen because they knew that God would use it to bring about the best good, the restoration and salvation for all who believe in him. Jesus knew, as did Joseph, that God has a plan and we can trust him in times of hardship. God's plan is not only personal for everyone who says yes to him, but also missional in how each person plays a role in his ultimate plan. Sometimes when our personal situations and ultimately our world seems dark, it's hard to see God has a plan for it all. It's hard to believe anything good can come from our trials and our pain. And yet, when we look at these stories, as well as so many others in the Bible, we see time and time again that God can turn seemingly impossible circumstances around to accomplish his good purpose. So, what are you facing right now that seems impossible? What hurt may you be carrying that you can't let go of? What situation in your life do you feel like God isn't present in or isn't big enough for? If you're like me, then the first step is fully embracing and trusting God, even and especially when there is no sense of what he's doing. Sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that we're in the hands of the God who created and holds the universe. And we need to simply trust and let go of our own agenda. So, what's the thing you're clinging to, praying it will work out the way you hoped? And what are you going to do with that thing? There's always only three options for taking action. Doing the same thing you were already doing something different, or doing nothing. And with Jesus, those things can look very different for each person. Maybe right now, God is calling you to lean into his sovereignty and to take a step in his direction. What would happen if we were all able to see our impossible circumstances as an opportunity for God to work? And what if we trusted God in the midst of our unknowns? If every Christian saw their trials as laying the foundation for God to work, then we'd look for opportunities to join him, rather than worry through and wait out the storm. We'd step out in spite of circumstances and respond with faith in action. We will find that together we can do big things like reach people groups for the gospel that have never heard it, local things like working to end homelessness in our community, as well as personal things like calling a loved one who struggles with mental health. No matter the magnitude, when we look at our impossible circumstances as an opportunity for God to work, we begin to see new ways we can participate in his plan. Changing the world for Jesus starts with just one person. And at the same time, reaching just one person for Jesus changes their world for the rest of their life. It starts with each one of us, just like Joseph, trusting God in the midst of what seems impossible and staying faithful, even when we don't understand what he's doing. When we step out in faith and remember that God can turn seemingly impossible circumstances around to accomplish his good purpose, there's no telling what we may be able to do with him. Thanks.